Long before modern houses of brick and glass, before heaters and electricity, people of the vast lands of North America lived face to face with nature. Their winters were merciless, snow piled higher than a man, winds sharp as knives, and storms that could swallow entire valleys in white silence. Yet the native peoples did not vanish in fear. They listened to the earth, studied the forests, learned from the animals, and turned the harsh land itself into their ally. They built shelters not only with hands, but with memory, structures born of wisdom passed from parent to child for countless generations. This is the story of survival in the face of blizzards so deadly they could wipe out the unprepared. It is the story of the teepee, the wigwam, the longhouse, the earth lodge, and the igloo. It is the story of people who chose not just to live, but to endure, together, against the storm. The first snow always arrived with silence. At dawn, the sky turned heavy gray, and the breath of the wind grew colder. Hunters returned quickly, carrying the last meat of the season, for they knew the storm was close. Children ran outside to catch the first flakes on their hands. They laughed, but the elders only watched the sky. They had seen too many winters, and they knew joy would soon give way to struggle. The wind rose. It swept across the plains, lifting white dust that stung the eyes. By nightfall, the land was no longer brown and green, but a sea of white stretching into endless distance. In the villages, families rushed to strengthen their shelters. Buffalo hides were tied tighter around the teepees, gaps sealed with extra skins. In the forests, men laid bark thicker on the wigwams, while women packed snow around the base to keep out the cold. In the longhouses, fires were fed higher, smoke drifting into the darkening sky. The storm came without mercy. For 3 days, snow fell so thick that the horizon disappeared. Hunters could not leave. Children cried in fear of the roaring wind. Yet within the shelters, fires glowed, elders told stories, and life clung stubbornly to warmth. It was not the first storm, nor would it be the last. But every blizzard taught the people the same truth: survival belonged to those who prepared, to those who remembered, and to those who stayed together. The winter winds swept endlessly across the open plains. Nothing stood in their path, no forests to break their force, no mountains to shield the villages. It was here that the people of the plains, the Lakota, the Sioux, the Cheyenne, and many others, learned the art of survival. Their weapon against the storm was not the bow or the spear, but the teepee. A teepee was more than a tent. It was a design born from centuries of struggle, shaped perfectly for the land it stood upon. To build it, hunters first sought tall, straight poles. They searched the river valleys for young cottonwoods or pines, trees that could be cut and smoothed to serve as the skeleton of their shelter. Each pole had to be chosen carefully. Too thin and it would snap in the wind, too thick and it would be impossible to carry when the tribe moved. The women, skilled and patient, prepared the hides. Buffalo, the lifeblood of the plains, provided not only food and clothing, but also the very walls of the home. Skins were cleaned, stretched, and sewn together with sinew, forming a great covering strong enough to resist the sharpest winds. When draped over the poles, the hides created a smooth cone that shed snow and rain like a mountain peak. Inside, the teepee was warm and alive. A central fire burned, its smoke drifting upward through a carefully designed vent. Families arranged themselves in a circle around the flames, elders to one side, children on the other, each with a place in the order of life. The floor was lined with furs, soft and insulating. Here, people slept, cooked, ate, laughed, and prayed, all while the storm howled outside. But the teepee was more than shelter. It was a symbol of mobility, freedom, and resilience. The poles could be quickly bundled, the hides folded, and the entire home carried by horses or dogs to the next camp. Wherever the buffalo herds roamed, the people followed, and their homes followed with them. One winter, when the snow fell earlier than expected, a young family found themselves far from the main village. The man, swift but weary from the hunt, gathered poles by the river. His wife, strong and skilled, stitched hides in the freezing dusk. Their children huddled together, teeth chattering. The storm was already rising. By moonlight, the teepee stood tall against the plain, its hide covering glowing orange from the fire within. The wind screamed, but could not tear it down. The snow piled at its base, but could not bury it. Inside, the family held each other close, whispering songs of ancestors. In that moment, the teepee was not just a house, it was life itself. The tribes knew that without the teepee, they would be lost. And so, generation after generation, mothers taught daughters how to cut and sew hides, fathers taught sons how to raise and tie the poles, and children grew knowing that the strength of their people was bound to the strength of their homes. The storm never asked permission before it struck. On the open plains, people often measured their lives between the blizzards. When one ended, they began preparing for the next. The teepee stood at the center of that preparation. A village of teepees was a sight to behold. From a distance, they appeared like white and brown cones scattered across the snowy earth, each one a fortress against the cold. Smoke rose in thin spirals from the tops, blending with the gray sky. Dogs barked, children's laughter echoed, and the steady rhythm of drums could sometimes be heard, even as the wind carried it away. Inside a single teepee, life was organized with care. The fire sat at the heart, feeding both warmth and light. To the west side rested sacred objects, bundles of herbs, carved figures, or painted hides that carried the prayers of the people. The entrance always faced east, welcoming the rising sun and reminding all who lived there that each day was a gift from the Creator. The hides covering the teepee were more than protection. They were decorated with symbols and stories. Some carried painted images of animals, the buffalo, the eagle, the wolf, spirits that guided and protected the family. Others showed the marks of battles, hunts, or visions seen in dreams. To walk through a village of teepees was to walk through a living library of memory, each shelter telling the history of the family within. When storms raged, the strength of the design became clear. The sloping walls allowed snow to slide off instead of crushing the structure. The poles, tied at the top with rawhide, bent with the wind but did not break. And when the cold tried to creep in, furs and extra hides sealed the base, turning the inside into a sanctuary. Children often gathered around the fire, listening to the voice of the grandmother, who carried stories older than the village itself. Her words painted the world before them, how the buffalo gave its life so people could live, how the stars told of ancestors watching from the sky, how storms were not enemies but teachers. The blizzard outside roared like a beast, yet her calm voice reminded them that they had survived before, and they would survive again. One night, a storm struck so violently that the snow buried half the village. The wind tore at the hides, and the air was filled with the cries of frightened children. But in the morning, when the storm passed, the teepees still stood. The snow around them glistened in the pale light, piled high but powerless to destroy what generations of wisdom had built. The elders gathered the children and pointed to the shelters. "Remember this," one said, his voice rough with age. "The storm is stronger than one man, stronger than 100 men. But it is not stronger than the teepee, and it is not stronger than the people who stand together." The teepee was more than cloth and wood. It was the embodiment of knowledge, portable, practical, sacred, and enduring. Wherever the people went, the teepee went with them. It was their shield, their hearth, and their symbol of survival against the endless blizzards of the plains. When the buffalo roamed, the people followed. For the tribes of the plains, the herds were life itself: food, clothing, tools, and above all, shelter. The teepee was tied inseparably to the buffalo. Without the hides, no walls could be made. Without the poles dragged by horses or dogs, no skeleton could rise. Hunting was not only survival, it was a ritual. Warriors painted their faces, offered prayers, and rode into the sea of grass where thousands of buffalo grazed. The thunder of hooves shook the earth, and arrows flew like flocks of birds. When the hunt was done, the people gave thanks, for each animal taken meant warmth through the winter. Women worked tirelessly to prepare the hides. They scraped away flesh with sharp stones, stretched the skins across wooden frames, and dried them in the cold sun. The hides were sewn together with sinew, every stitch strong enough to hold against the storm. The women's skill was as important as the men's courage. Without them, no teepee could stand. Inside the teepee, daily life unfolded in rhythm with the seasons. In winter, the fire crackled endlessly, fed with wood gathered at great effort. Mothers cooked stews of dried meat and roots, the smell filling the air. Children played with small carved toys, sometimes imitating the hunts they saw their fathers perform. Elders spoke of battles, migrations, and visions, their words weaving the tribe's history into the minds of the young. At night, when the storm raged hardest, the teepee glowed from within. The firelight painted the hides orange, and shadows danced across the sloping walls. Outside, the blizzard buried the world, but inside there was laughter, warmth, and song. Men beat drums softly, women sang lullabies, and the children drifted into dreams, safe beneath the protection of buffalo and wood. The people carried their homes with pride. When the tribe moved to follow the herds, the poles were bound together and dragged by horses, forming a travois. The hides were rolled and carried, ready to be raised again wherever the camp settled. In this way, the village breathed like a living being, gathering, moving, resting, and rising once more. One elder told the children, "The teepee is not only a shelter. It is our circle of life. The poles are the ribs, the hides are the flesh, the fire is the heart. When we sit inside the body of our people." Thus, the teepee was not just wood and hide, but spirit and meaning. It stood against the storm not only because of its clever design, but because it carried the strength of the people who built it, loved it, and lived within its circle. Winter did not only test the body, it tested the spirit. Inside the teepee, the people learned patience, endurance, and hope. For weeks, storms could rage without pause. Hunters could not leave, food stores ran low, and the children grew restless. Yet within those conical walls, life went on. The fire at the center became a symbol of survival. Each morning, before the first light of dawn, someone fed the flames. It was more than warmth, it was life's heartbeat, a reminder that as long as the fire burned, the people endured. The smoke curled upward through the vent at the top, rising into the blizzard sky like a prayer to the spirits above. Families created rhythm in the endless white days. Women tanned hides, repaired clothes, and stitched new coverings for the teepees. Men sharpened weapons, prepared arrows, and told the boys stories of the hunt. Girls sat close to their mothers, learning the craft of sewing and the meaning of each painted symbol drawn on the hides. When the storm outside grew too loud to sleep, elders began their storytelling. Their voices carried across generations. They spoke of a time when the world was covered only in water, and a great bird brought land to the people. They told how the buffalo gave itself so humans could live, and how the Creator taught the people to respect the circle of life. Children listened with wide eyes. The walls of the teepee became more than hide, they became a canvas for imagination. The roar of the wind transformed into the voices of spirits, and the shadows of the fire danced like ancestors around them. Outside, snow buried the earth in silence. The village of teepees seemed like islands in a frozen sea. But inside, life pulsed with warmth, rhythm, and meaning. The storm could not break the circle. One evening, after days of relentless blizzard, the winds suddenly died. A calm silence spread across the plains. Warriors pushed aside the piled snow at the entrance and stepped into the pale light of the moon. The land lay white and endless, but the village still stood. The teepees, half buried yet unbroken, glowed faintly with the orange of their fires. The people gathered outside, lifting their hands to the sky in gratitude. They had survived once more, not because the stone was weak, but because their shelters were strong, and because their hearts were stronger still. The teepee was not only protection, it was proof. Proof that humans, guided by wisdom and unity, could face even the deadliest force of nature and rise again. As the years passed, the teepee became more than a structure of survival, it became the heart of every family's story. A child was born within its circle, his first cries mingling with the crackle of fire. An elder breathed his last beneath its roof, the smoke carrying his spirit upward into the sky. Between those two moments stretched the rhythm of life, and all of it unfolded inside the shelter that guarded them from the storm. Each family had its own teepee, but the village itself was a circle of many teepees together. In the center lay the council fire, larger than any other, where leaders met to speak of hunts, of battles, and of the people's future. Around it, the teepees stood like guardians, their entrances all facing the rising sun. To walk through the village was to feel part of a greater body, many families, yet one people. The design of the teepee was sacred, and each part carried meaning. The three main poles symbolized the connection between body, mind, and spirit. The circle at the base reflected the circle of the earth, the seasons, and the endless cycle of life. Even the smoke hole at the top was said to be a gateway through which prayers traveled to the heavens. When storms came, the people did not see them only as danger. They saw them as teachers. A blizzard reminded them of humility, of the need to prepare, of the importance of unity. Children learned early that to survive the winter was not the achievement of one person, but of all working together, the hunters, the gatherers, the storytellers, the builders. The teepee stood because every hand had played a role in its making. In the dead of winter, when food was scarce and the snow lay deep, families often visited one another, moving quickly from teepee to teepee through narrow tunnels dug in the drifts. Laughter traveled through the cold air as neighbors shared meat, dried berries, or warm broth. No one was left hungry, for the people believed that a fire that fed only one family would die quickly, but a fire that fed many would burn forever. One blizzard was remembered for generations. The storm raged for 7 days without rest. Snow piled taller than a man, and the plains howled like a living beast. But when it ended, and the sun broke through the clouds, the village still stood. The teepees were half buried, but not broken. The elders declared that the storm itself had bowed in respect to the strength of the people's homes. The children grew up hearing this story, their eyes shining with pride. They knew then that the teepee was not just cloth and poles, it was a gift, an inheritance of wisdom, and the shield of their ancestors. The teepee was not only the center of family life, it was the stage where the great moments of the people unfolded. When a child was born, the women of the family gathered inside the teepee, heating stones in the fire to warm water, whispering prayers to the spirits of protection. The mother's cries rose and fell with the storm outside, and when at last the baby's voice joined the fire's crackle, the entire family rejoiced. The first breath of life was taken within the sacred circle of the teepee, and the first sound a child heard was the fire that had protected generations before. When young men returned from the hunt, dragging heavy buffalo hides across the snow, they carried not only food but the very walls of the people's homes. In the evenings, after the meat was roasted and shared, the hides were given to the women, who scraped, stretched, and stitched by firelight. Each stitch carried patience, each seam carried survival. Children watched their mothers' hands move quickly, knowing that one day those same skills would rest in their fingers. The teepee was also where the people celebrated. In the winter nights, when storms locked them inside for days, the firelight turned the walls into canvases. Shadows of dancers moved across the hides, drums beat softly, and voices rose in song. The blizzard outside howled like a beast, but inside, joy and rhythm defied the storm. The teepee became a place of resilience, where not even the fiercest winds could silence the music of life. And when death came, as it came to every family, the teepee held its silence. The body of an elder, wrapped in furs, lay in the same space where they had once told stories and laughed by the fire. The smoke hole above became a passageway for the spirit, and the people whispered farewell as the flames carried prayers into the night sky. Thus, the teepee contained every stage of life: birth, youth, love, celebration, and death. It was the first world a child knew, and the last roof an elder saw. It was the unbroken circle, the keeper of memory, and the silent witness to every breath between the storms. One elder said, "As long as the teepee stands, our people will stand. And when the storms come, they will find us ready, not because the wind is weak, but because our circle is strong." The storm swept across the wide plains like a living creature, fierce and endless. For the people who lived beneath the vast sky, the blizzard was no stranger. It came every winter, sometimes early, sometimes late, but always with the same lesson: only the strong and the prepared would survive. And for the native tribes of the plains, strength was measured not only by their warriors or their hunts, but by the homes they carried with them, the teepees. The teepee was more than a tent. It was the heart of survival, the proof of generations of wisdom. The people knew how to raise it quickly, sometimes within an hour, and how to secure it so no wind could break it. Tall wooden poles, gathered from faraway valleys, formed its skeleton. Buffalo hides, stitched with sinew, wrapped around the frame like armor. When the wind screamed, the conical walls bent but never broke, letting the storm slip away like water from a stone. Life inside the teepee was both ordinary and sacred. A fire burned at the center, and above it the smoke hole let breath escape to the sky. The walls glowed orange with firelight, shadows dancing like spirits on the hide. Families slept in a circle, wrapped in furs. Children clutched carved toys, mothers whispered lullabies, fathers sharpened arrows by the dim glow. The storm outside roared, but within, the people created a world of warmth. The teepee was a circle, and the circle was sacred. The base represented the earth, endless and unbroken. The poles reached upward, like prayers, connecting the people to the sky. The fire in the middle was the heart, and the smoke hole was the spirit's path to the Creator. To live in the teepee was to live in balance, with nature, with family, with the unseen world of ancestors. Every stage of life unfolded within its walls. A child's first cries rose beside the fire. A young man painted his face there before the hunt. Lovers whispered promises as snow tapped gently on the hides. And when age claimed an elder, his final breath drifted through the smoke hole into the sky. The teepee was cradle, hearth, temple, and grave. The people moved often, following the buffalo herds that gave them food, tools, and the hides for their homes. When the camp shifted, the village became a moving body. Women packed the hides, men gathered the poles, and horses dragged the long travois across the earth. Soon, in a new place, the circle of teepees rose again, smoke curling into the sky as if the village had been there forever. Storms came again and again, sometimes burying the teepees in snow up to their roofs. Yet when the wind died and the sun returned, the village always stood. Children dug tunnels through the drifts, laughing as they crawled from one shelter to another. Neighbors shared food, carried firewood, and strengthened walls. No one faced the blizzard alone. One winter, a storm raged for 7 days. The plains howled with such fury that even the buffalo disappeared. Snow sealed the entrances, and people dug their way out with hands numb from the cold. Yet when at last the sky cleared, the teepees still stood, half buried but unbroken. The elders told the children, "Look well. The storm is stronger than a man, stronger than 100 men. But it is not stronger than our circle. It cannot break what we have built together." From then on, the teepee was remembered not only as a home, but as a promise. A promise that no matter how hard the wind blew, the people would endure. The storm might roar, the snow might bury the earth, but the circle of the teepee, and the circle of the people, would never fall. Deep in the eastern woodlands, far from the endless plains, the world was different. The trees rose tall and close, their branches locking together to shield the sky. Rivers wound through the forests, feeding the land with life. Here the people faced winters just as deadly, but their answer was not the teepee. It was the wigwam. The wigwam was round, domed like a half-buried shell, built from the very bones of the forest. Men cut young saplings in the autumn, bending them carefully into arches. The women, skilled with patience, laid bark, mats of reeds, and woven hides across the frame, sealing the walls tight against the wind. Snow pressed down on the roof, but instead of crushing it, the weight only made the shelter stronger. Inside the wigwam, the world felt different than in the teepee. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and bark, and the fire burned low, glowing against the curved walls. Families gathered close, sitting on mats of reeds and skins. The round shape of the home echoed the circle of life, just as the teepee did, but the wigwams seemed more rooted, more connected to the soil beneath. Children laughed as they warmed their hands by the flames, while mothers stirred pots of cornmeal and venison. The crackle of the fire mixed with the sound of stories, elders speaking of how the first wigwam was given by the spirits of the forest, a gift to remind the people that even the trees themselves could become allies against the storm. When the blizzard struck, the forest groaned under the weight of snow. Branches snapped, winds screamed through the trunks, and animals fled into burrows. But the wigwams stood like small mounds of earth, their curved backs hunched against the storm. Inside, the firelight painted the bark walls red and gold. The people sang softly, their voices weaving with the roar of the wind until storm and song became one. The wigwam was not only for survival, it was for memory. Families decorated the inside with woven mats, carved masks, and sacred bundles. Children slept wrapped in furs, their dreams filled with the rhythm of drums and the warmth of the hearth. The storm outside could rage for days, but inside there was always a sense of belonging, a circle of light in the endless dark. One winter, when the snow piled higher than the door, the people dug tunnels to move between wigwams. From above, the village seemed buried, only small holes in the white surface showing where life still breathed. Yet beneath, the fires glowed, the people shared food, and laughter echoed in the tunnels. The storm did not silence them, it taught them unity. The wigwam was small compared to the vast longhouses of other tribes, but its strength lay in its intimacy. It brought families close, reminded them that survival was not just about walls and roofs, but about warmth shared together. In every creak of wood, in every stitch of bark, the wigwam whispered the wisdom of the forest: bend, do not break, endure, do not fall. The forest in winter was both a prison and a guardian. Its tall trees broke the fury of the wind, but the heavy snow weighed down the branches until they cracked with loud groans, echoing through the night like the voices of giants. In those moments, the people inside their wigwams pulled their children closer, whispering prayers that the trees would hold. Every wigwam had its rhythm of life. At dawn, smoke curled upward through the roof, drifting into the gray sky. Men rose first, wrapped in heavy cloaks, to check the traps they had set the day before: snares for rabbits, pits for deer, hooks hidden in the icy rivers. Women tended the fire, stirring what little food was left from the night. Children, still wrapped in skins, awoke slowly, the frost painting their breaths into the air. The wigwam was small, but it was alive. Its bark walls carried the scent of the forest inside, reminding the people that they were never far from the land that gave them life. The round dome created a womb-like safety. No corner felt empty, every sound circled back to the center, binding the family together in a single, unbroken space. In long winters, when storms buried the paths and the world turned white, storytelling became the food of the spirit. Elders sat by the fire, their faces lined with years, their voices steady as the flames. They told of how the first people had walked out of the deep waters, guided by the animals. They spoke of the great bear who carried fire in his paws, of the eagle who taught humans how to see beyond the horizon. The children leaned forward, their eyes wide, forgetting the cold, lost in the worlds created by words. But the wigwam was not only a place of stories. It was also a place of ceremony. In winter months, when the earth seemed dead, families gathered to honor the spirits that guarded the forest. They burned sweetgrass, filling the wigwam with fragrant smoke. They sang songs that had been carried for centuries, their voices weaving together like the threads of a great net that tied them to their ancestors. The walls glowed red with firelight, and the snow outside seemed to vanish, replaced by warmth, song, and memory. Food was precious in those times. The wigwam kept people warm, but without meat and corn, the fire alone could not sustain life. Hunters risked their lives in the storm, tracking deer through the forest. Sometimes they returned triumphant, dragging fresh meat across the snow. Other times they returned empty-handed, their faces pale with exhaustion. In those moments, the family shared what little they had, giving the youngest and oldest the most, while the strong endured their hunger silently. The wigwam became the place where sacrifice was made, where love was measured not in words but in food given to another. One legendary storm remained in the stories of the people for generations. Snow fell for 12 days, burying the forest until the paths disappeared and the trees seemed like ghosts in a white sea. The wigwams were covered nearly to their roofs, only small smoke holes showing where families still lived. Men dug tunnels to connect the shelters, crawling on hands and knees through the snow. Children laughed as they traveled the hidden passages, while mothers passed bowls of broth through the tunnels, ensuring no one went hungry. When the storm ended, and the sun returned, the village emerged from the white earth like a rebirth. They said the storm had tried to swallow them whole, but the wigwams had taught them to endure. The wigwam, humble and small, carried within it the heart of the forest. It taught the people that strength was not always in size, but in balance. The bent saplings, the bark walls, the snow pressed against its sides, all worked together to create a shield against death. And for the families who lived within, the wigwam was not just a house of bark and wood. It was a circle of warmth in the endless cold, a place where voices rose above the howling wind, and a promise that no matter how fierce the storm, the people of the forest would not fall. In the heart of the eastern woodlands, where rivers wound like silver snakes through endless forests, the people built shelters larger than any teepee or wigwam. These were the longhouses, vast structures that stretched like wooden ships anchored to the earth. A single longhouse could rise 100 feet in length, its arched roof curving like the back of a giant beast. Unlike the teepee or the wigwam, the longhouse was not for one family alone. It was for many. Entire clans lived under its roof. Grandparents, parents, children, cousins, all bound by blood and tradition, shared the same fire, the same walls, the same breath of life. In winter, when the world outside turned white and deadly, this unity was their strength. The longhouse was framed with tall saplings bent into arches, bound with strips of bark and sinew. Over the skeleton, sheets of elm bark were layered like scales, overlapping to keep out snow and rain. The result was a fortress of wood, long and narrow, with a roof that curved high above. Inside, a central aisle stretched the length of the house, with hearths placed at intervals. Smoke drifted upward, escaping through carefully cut vents in the roof. Families gathered around each hearth, their mats and sleeping places spread along the walls. The sound of a longhouse was unlike any other shelter. It was alive with many voices. Children's laughter echoed through the aisles, women's songs rose as they pounded corn into meal, and the deep voices of men filled the air as they spoke of hunts and battles. At night, the crackle of many fires blended with the hum of conversation, the bark walls glowing faintly with the light of dozens of flames. When a blizzard struck, the longhouse became a fortress against despair. The storm howled outside, but inside, life carried on. The fires burned steadily, feeding warmth into the great space. Food was shared from family to family, no one left hungry, for in a longhouse, one person's struggle was everyone's. The children played by the fire, the elders told stories that bound the people to their ancestors, and the storm outside became only another voice in the chorus of winter. But the longhouse was more than survival. It was the beating heart of the people's culture. Councils gathered in its center, chiefs and elders seated in a circle, their words echoing beneath the arched roof. Here, decisions were made that shaped the fate of the tribe: where to hunt, when to move, how to respond to enemies. The longhouse was not only shelter, it was a hall of judgment, of memory, of dreams. Ceremonies unfolded beneath its roof. In winter, when the snow locked the village inside, the longhouse became a sacred stage. Drums beat deep and slow, rattles shook, voices rose in chants that called to the spirits of earth and sky. Painted dancers moved in the firelight, their shadows climbing the walls, their steps echoing like thunder. Outside, the blizzard buried the land, but inside the longhouse, the people touched the eternal. The children grew up surrounded by this unity. They learned that strength was not in standing alone but in standing together. When one fire dimmed, another shared its flame. When one family's food ran out, others filled their bowls. And when sorrow struck, when death took a loved one, the entire longhouse mourned together, voices rising in song to guide the spirit safely to the other world. One story was told of a winter so harsh that no hunt could succeed. For weeks, the people lived only on what little corn and dried meat remained. Hunger gnawed at every stomach, yet no one died. Why? Because in the longhouse, the strong gave to the weak, the young fed the old, and the old gave their blessings in return. They said that winter taught them the truest meaning of their shelter. The longhouse was not built of bark and poles, but of generosity and love. When the storm finally broke and the sun returned, the longhouse still stood, blackened with smoke, its walls heavy with frost. But within, the people were alive, their spirits unbroken. They had endured not because the storm was gentle, but because their unity was greater than the cold. The longhouse was more than a house. It was a living body, its ribs the bent poles, its skin the bark, its breath the smoke rising into the sky. And as long as the longhouse stood, so too did the people, bound together under one roof, facing the storm not as many, but as one. Far to the west of the great forests and beyond the rolling plains, another kind of shelter rose from the earth itself. These were the earth lodges, homes that looked like hills resting on the horizon. Strong, circular, and half buried in the soil, they were fortresses built against the most merciless storms of winter. The people who built them knew the land well. On the wide river valleys of the Great Plains, where timber grew along the banks and endless winds swept the grasslands, they found what they needed. Men cut heavy logs, thick enough to hold the weight of a hill, and set them in a circle. Across these frames, they laid beams and branches, weaving a dome like the bones of a giant. Then they covered it all with sod, thick layers of soil and grass, until the house itself seemed to disappear into the earth. From the outside, an earth lodge looked like a mound of dirt. Smoke curled from a hole in its center, and a narrow passage led inside. But within, the world transformed. The thick earthen walls kept the storm's fury at bay. Snow might bury the plains in silence, winds might scream across the valleys, but inside the lodge it was warm, steady, alive. Families lived together in these shelters, their mats spread around the circular walls. The fire burned in the center, its smoke climbing toward the hole above. Around it, life unfolded. Mothers cooked stews of corn, squash, and dried meat, their pots bubbling with steam. Children played on the packed earth floor, carving figures of buffalo and deer. Elders sat in quiet dignity, their voices weaving stories into the night. The lodge was more than a house. It was a community in itself. Large earth lodges could hold several families, and entire villages of them rose along the riverbanks. From a distance, they looked like clusters of rounded hills, alive with smoke and voices. In winter, when storms turned the plains into a sea of white, these villages became islands of survival, each lodge a world of its own, yet connected to all the rest. The storms came as they always did, fierce and unrelenting. Snow buried the land so deeply that travelers vanished without a trace. Winds tore across the plains like invisible beasts, ripping at anything left in the open. But the earth lodges stood unmoved. The walls, thick with soil, were too heavy for the wind to shake. The roofs, weighted with snow, only grew stronger beneath its press. Inside, the fires burned on, and families sang songs to remind themselves that they were stronger than the storm. One winter, a storm so powerful swept the plains that even the buffalo scattered, vanishing into ravines. Hunters never returned, and the land seemed cursed. But within the earth lodges, the people endured. They rationed food carefully, shared firewood, and told stories to the children so that fear never silenced their voices. When at last the sun returned and the snow began to melt, the villages emerged unharmed, their shelters standing as proudly as the day they were built. The earth lodge also carried deep meaning. Its circular design reflected the cycle of life, the dome representing the sky, and the floor the earth beneath. The smoke hole was the connection to the spirit world, the path through which prayers and thanks rose to the Creator. Living in the lodge reminded the people daily that they were part of the earth itself, bound to it by body and spirit. And so the earth lodges became more than shelters. They were symbols of endurance, of balance with the land. Built from the very soil of the plains, they were part of the earth and as unshakable as the hills themselves. Families were born within them, songs echoed through their walls, and even as blizzards roared above, life flourished inside. To those who lived there, the storm was never an enemy. It was a teacher, a reminder of humility and strength. And the earth lodge was the answer, a home so deeply tied to the land that even the fiercest winter could not tear it down. Far to the north, where the world seemed endless and white, the cold was a living thing. It cut through skin like knives, froze rivers into stone, and stole the breath from a man's lungs. In this land of eternal snow, where even the sun sometimes vanished for months, the Inuit people created one of the most remarkable shelters the world has ever known, the igloo. The igloo was not born of wood or bark, not of hides or earth. It was carved from the snow itself, the very force that threatened to kill. Where others saw only danger, the Inuits saw possibility. They learned that snow, when packed hard, could be cut into blocks as strong as stone. With practiced skill, they carved and stacked the blocks in a spiral, each one leaning inward, locking together until a perfect dome rose from the frozen ground. The igloo was a miracle of design. Its walls, made of ice, trapped warmth within. Body heat, combined with the glow of a single oil lamp burning seal fat, was enough to raise the inside temperature far above the deadly chill outside. A narrow tunnel served as the entrance, low and long, forcing the freezing wind to crawl rather than rush inside. The dome curved overhead, smooth and white, glowing faintly as light filtered through the snow. Inside, families found not only shelter, but comfort. The floor was lined with skins, caribou, seal, and bear, soft beneath weary bodies. Mothers cooked fish and seal meat over small flames, the smell rich and comforting against the icy air. Children huddled together, their laughter echoing in the dome, their cheeks glowing pink from warmth. Elders sat at the edges, their voices steady as they told stories of the old times, of great hunters, of spirits who lived in the northern lights, of journeys across the endless ice. The igloo was more than a house. It was a symbol of genius, a testament to the people's ability to turn even the harshest environment into an ally. In the heart of a storm, when the Arctic wind howled like a beast, the igloo stood unmoved. Snow piled around it, only thickening its walls, making it stronger. While the world outside became a frozen wilderness, inside glowed with orange firelight and the warmth of family. One winter, the winds swept so violently across the ice that even the dogs could not stand. Hunters staggered through the white blur, their faces numb, their sleds lost. Yet in the distance, glowing faintly beneath the aurora, an igloo stood. Smoke rose from its vent, and laughter carried softly through the storm. The hunters crawled inside, saved not by firewood or stone, but by the wisdom of their people. To the Inuit, the igloo was also sacred. Its dome mirrored the sky, its circle reflected the endless horizon, and its narrow entrance symbolized humility. One had to bow low to enter, reminding all that survival required respect for the world around them. Within its walls, people felt not only warmth, but connection, to each other, to their ancestors, into the frozen land that had shaped their lives. Even as the storm roared, the igloo whispered a truth older than memory, that life could bloom even in the heart of ice, and that with knowledge, patience, and unity, no force of nature was too great to endure. The storm raged outside, but within the shelters the fires burned bright. Children gathered close, their small faces glowing with light, their eyes wide as the elders began to speak. In the tipis of the plains, grandmothers told of the great buffalo spirit. They said its breath became the wind, its hooves the thunder, its hide the walls that shielded the people. As long as you honor the buffalo, the elder whispered, you will never be without shelter. In the wigwams of the forests, voices spoke of trees that gave their bark and saplings that bent willingly to form the bones of the home. The forest is alive, they said. Each wigwam is a gift from its heart. The snow pressed against the walls, but the people felt safe, for the stories made the storm seem less cruel. In the longhouses, songs rose like smoke into the rafters. Drums beat deep, steady as the heartbeat of the earth. Men and women chanted together, their voices weaving with the blizzard's howl. Children danced in the glow of many fires, their shadows leaping like spirits along the bark walls. The longhouse became more than shelter, it became a bridge between the people and the unseen world. In the earth lodges, the thick walls echoed with myths of creation. The elders spoke of how the Creator shaped the first lodge from soil, making it round to mirror the circle of life. The smoke hole, they told the children, is the path of our prayers. Through it, our voices rise to the sky. The storm beat on the roof above, but the people sat steady, believing themselves cradled in the body of the earth itself. Far north, in the glowing igloos beneath the northern lights, the Inuit pointed to the sky. "Those are the spirits of our ancestors," they said. They danced to remind us we are never alone. Children pressed their cheeks to the snow walls, watching the colors ripple. Even as the storm shrieked, the lights above promised safety, and the people sang quietly, their voices warm against the endless cold. Every shelter, every fire, every voice carried the same truth: the storm could not silence them. Instead, it gave their legends strength. And as the blizzard howled through the night, the people remembered, they were not just surviving. They were keeping alive the memory of all who came before, and the promise of all who would come after. The blizzard rolled on for days, a white wall that swallowed the horizon. Across the plains, in the forests, along the rivers, on the ice fields of the north, the people waited inside their shelters. The wind clawed, the snow buried doors, the cold pressed hard. Yet inside there was always fire, always song, always memory. In one teepee, a child asked his grandmother, "Why does the storm hate us?" The elder smiled, her wrinkled face glowing in the firelight. "The storm does not hate," she said softly. "It tests. It asks us if we have listened to the wisdom of our ancestors. If we honor the buffalo, the forest, the earth, the ice, then we will endure." In a wigwam, fathers told their sons, "The snow is heavy, but it makes the walls strong. Bend like the sapling. Do not break." The boys listened, their small hands tracing the bark walls, feeling how the storm pressed but did not destroy. In the longhouse, hunger grew, but food was shared until every child had eaten. The people whispered, "We are many, yet we are one." They warmed each other not only with fire but with unity, their voices weaving into chants that echoed through the night. In the earth lodges, the people prayed into the smoke hole, sending their breath to the sky. "We are part of you," they told the storm. "And you are part of us." The walls of soil held firm, as though the earth itself had wrapped its arms around them. In the igloos beneath the northern lights, the Inuit watched the sky shimmer green and blue. The elders said, "The lights are our ancestors dancing. They tell us that storms end, but the people endure." Children laughed, pressing their cheeks to the glowing snow, unafraid of the howl outside. When at last the storm ended, the world was silent. The sun rose pale above the frozen land, its light glinting across snow that stretched forever. Villages emerged slowly, people digging their way out. Teepees stood half-buried but unbroken. Wigwams glistened under their blanket of white. Longhouses smoked like great ships after battle. Earth lodges rose like small hills, steady and proud. Igloos glowed softly beneath the dawn. The people stepped into the light, their faces tired but their spirits fierce. They had survived, not because the stone was weak, but because their shelters were strong, and because their hearts were stronger still. Every shelter was more than wood, hide, bark, soil, or snow. It was knowledge. It was tradition. It was memory made solid. It was the spirit of a people refusing to bow to the cold. And so the lesson lived on: storms will come, storms will rage, but as long as the people remember who they are, no wind, no snow, no winter can erase them. When the storm finally passed, the land lay silent. Snow stretched across the horizon like a wide ocean, broken only by the dark tips of trees and the smoke curling from shelters that had endured. The people stepped out slowly, their feet sinking deep, their eyes squinting against the pale sun. The blizzard had left scars, but it had also left proof: the wisdom of their ancestors was stronger than the fiercest winter. Children ran first, laughing, chasing each other through the drifts. Their voices echoed like birds returning in spring. Hunters lifted their faces to the sky, breathing in the clean air, giving thanks to the spirits for sparing their families. Mothers carried baskets to gather wood, their hands already preparing for the next storm. Life resumed, not as if nothing had happened, but as if the people had grown stronger through the trial. Each shelter stood as testimony. The teepees on the plains leaned but did not fall. The wigwams of the forest, their bark walls heavy with frost, glowed with the breath of families inside. The longhouses smoked steadily, their doors opening to reveal rows of smiling faces. The earth lodges, half buried in white, looked like part of the land itself, eternal and unmoved. And the igloos of the north still glowed softly beneath the shimmering sky, domes of snow transformed into beacons of survival. That night, when the stars returned, fires burned in every shelter. Families gathered close once more, but this time their songs were songs of triumph. They sang not only to honor the storm, but to honor themselves, their courage, their unity, their shelters that had turned death into life. Elders lifted their voices above the flames. Remember this. The storm is not our enemy. It is our teacher. It comes to see if we are ready, if we are faithful to the wisdom of those who came before. We survived not because the winter was kind, but because we honored the land, the animals, the trees, the soil, the snow. As long as we remember, we will endure. The children listened, their hearts filled with pride. They looked at the glowing walls around them, hide, bark, earth, snow, and saw not just homes, but the spirits of their people living strong. They knew one day they would build the same shelters, tell the same stories, and guide their own children through storms yet to come. And beyond the horizon, new clouds gathered. Another storm would come, as it always did. But the people no longer feared. For they carried inside them the fire of memory, the circle of survival, and the unbroken promise: no storm can erase us. The winters never ended. One storm would pass, and another would rise from the horizon, rolling like a living wall of white. For the people, this was not tragedy, it was truth. The land was a teacher, and the storm its voice. Every shelter they built, every fire they lit, every story they told was part of a lesson older than memory. In the plains, teepees rose and fell with the rhythm of the buffalo herds. Families moved, hunted, sang, and prayed, always ready for the winds that chased them. The buffalo gave its life, and in return the people honored it with gratitude, turning its hide into walls that shielded them from death. In the forests, wigwams curved against the snow, bending like saplings, strong because they yielded. The bark walls carried the breath of the trees, reminding each family that survival was a gift of the forest itself. When storms crushed branches and froze rivers, the people knew the wigwams' round walls would endure, as the earth itself endures. In the villages of the rivers, longhouses burned with the light of many fires. The voices of hundreds rose into the rafters, weaving together in song, chant, and prayer. Their strength was unity, their shelter a reminder that many hearts beating as one could withstand even the fiercest blizzard. In the wide plains, earth lodges stood like hills, unmoved by the rage of winter. Half buried in the soil, they taught that the land was not only something to live upon, it was something to live within. Each storm that pressed down on their roofs only made them stronger, as if the earth itself had claimed them as part of its body. And in the north, where the horizon gleamed with the fire of the aurora, igloos glowed like lanterns in the endless night. They reminded the people that even in the most barren land, wisdom could turn snow into a fortress, and silence into laughter. All these shelters, tipis, wigwams, longhouses, earth lodges, and igloos, were not just answers to cold winds. They were the voice of survival, the memory of ancestors, the promise of the future. They were the circle unbroken. The elders taught. The storm will always come. You cannot stop it. But you can prepare. You can build. You can remember. And if you remember, you will endure. Children carried these words as they grew, learning to cut poles, to stitch hides, to bend saplings, to pile soil, to carve snow. Each generation added to the memory, each shelter a bridge from past to future. And so the circle turned. Storms came, storms passed, and the people remained. Their shelters were not merely homes, they were living stories, born from the land, shaped by the storm, and carried in the hearts of all who survived. The eternal circle could not be broken. As long as fire burned, as long as voices rose in song, as long as people built shelters with hands and memory, winter itself bowed to their endurance. The shelters were strong, but the true strength came from the people who lived within them. Each family, each heart, carried a story of survival. When the blizzards came, those stories wove together like threads in a great blanket, wrapping the people against despair. The child. In a teepee on the plains, a boy named Wakasa lay awake as the wind howled. Snow piled high outside, and the walls trembled. He pressed his ear against the hide and swore he could hear voices in the storm, spirits whispering, testing him. His grandmother stroked his hair and told him, "The storm speaks only to those who listen. It tells you to be strong, because one day you will protect others." Wakasa closed his eyes, clutching his carved buffalo toy, and dreamed of standing tall against the blizzard. The mother. In a wigwam deep in the forest, a mother named Awanaki stirred a pot of cornmeal. The firelight painted her face as she hummed a song older than memory. Her children sat beside her, their cheeks red from the heat. Outside, branches cracked beneath the weight of snow, and wolves howled in the distance. She listened but did not fear. She knew the wigwam's round walls would hold. She whispered to her little ones, "The forest bends, and so must we. Bend, and you will never break." The hunter. In a longhouse, a hunter named Takota sharpened his spear by the glow of the hearth. Food was low, and his people were hungry. He knew that when the storm eased, he must face the white wilderness to find deer. His sons watched him, silent, learning not only how to sharpen wood but how to carry responsibility. He spoke softly, "Strength is not in how far you walk, but in how far you carry others." His words sank deeper than any wound, teaching the boys the meaning of survival. The Elder. In an earth lodge, an elder named Maddo sat near the smoke hole, wrapped in furs. His voice cracked, yet it filled the room with power. He told the children how long ago the Creator formed the first people from the soil itself, teaching them to live inside the earth, safe from storms. The little ones leaned close, forgetting hunger, forgetting fear. When Maddo lifted his hands, the fire reflected in his eyes. "Remember," he said, "the earth is your mother. She will not let you fall." The Hunter of the North. Far away, in the frozen north, an Inuit hunter named Nanook dragged a seal across the ice. The blizzard tore at his face, but he saw the faint glow of his igloo ahead. Crawling through the narrow tunnel, he entered the warm dome where his family waited. His wife's smile was a sunrise, his children's laughter a song. He handed them meat and whispered, "The storm is strong, but so are we." The igloo held steady, its snow walls glowing like lanterns against the night. The people lived in different lands, built different shelters, and spoke different words. Yet their stories were one. In every teepee, wigwam, longhouse, earth lodge, and igloo, the same truth burned: storms would always come, but together they could endure. The elders had spoken of it for years, a storm unlike any other. A blizzard so fierce it would test every shelter, every family, every memory of survival. When the first gray clouds gathered on the horizon, the people felt it in their bones. The animals grew restless, the rivers froze early, and the air itself seemed to hold its breath. The first winds came low and sharp, cutting through the forests and sweeping across the plains. Then came the snow, thick, endless, relentless. It fell for days without pause, burying trails, covering villages, swallowing the land in white silence. On the plains, the Lakota tightened their teepees with extra hides, sealing every gap. Fires glowed within, but outside the snow rose higher and higher. Hunters who tried to leave vanished into the storm, their tracks erased in moments. Families huddled close, singing softly, whispering prayers to the buffalo spirit. The teepees bent under the weight, but none collapsed. The storm clawed, but the circle held. In the forests, the wigwams disappeared beneath mounds of snow. From above, it seemed as if no one lived, only hills of white where the village had been. But beneath those curved roofs, life burned bright. Fires warmed the bark walls, mothers cooked broth from dried berries and venison, and children crawled through tunnels dug between wigwams, laughing in the hidden passageways. The storm thought it had buried them, but it had only made them stronger. In the longhouses, the great wooden halls shook with the voice of the blizzard. Snow piled against the bark walls, an icy wind whistled through the smoke vents. But inside, dozens of fires burned, their heat rising like a shield. Families gathered, sharing every scrap of food, every spark of flame. Songs rose together, echoing in the rafters, drowning out the storm's howl. The longhouse became not just shelter but fortress, a place where unity turned fear into courage. In the earth lodges, the storm pressed heavy on the plains, but the earth lodges stood unmoved. Covered in sod and soil, they blended into the snow like part of the land itself. Inside, the thick walls kept the cold at bay. The people sat in circles, telling stories of the first lodge built by the Creator. Even as hunger gnawed and the winds screamed above, the earth cradled them like children, keeping them safe in her embrace. In the Arctic, and far to the north, where the blizzard struck hardest, the Inuit carved new igloos in the white fury itself. Blocks of snow were stacked swiftly, hands moving even as the storm roared around them. Inside the glowing domes, lamps burned, and children watched the northern light shimmer faintly through the walls of ice. "The spirits dance for us," the elders said. "They remind us that no storm lasts forever." For 12 days the storm raged. 12 nights of darkness, hunger, and fear. But when it ended, and the sky cleared to reveal a world reborn in white, the people emerged. Villages rose from the snow, smoke climbing into the clear air. The shelters had held, the tipis, the wigwams, the longhouses, the earth lodges, the igloos, all still standing, all alive with voices. The great blizzard became legend. Children yet unborn would one day hear of it and know, storms are strong, but the people are stronger. When the great blizzard finally passed, the land seemed remade. Hills of snow covered the plains, rivers lay frozen like glass, and forests bent low beneath heavy white weight. Yet in every shelter, new voices had been born, children whose first breaths had risen with the smoke, whose first cries had mingled with the howl of the storm. These children were called the children of the storm. Elders said they carried the strength of the blizzard in their bones, and the patience of fire in their hearts. In the plains, in a teepee, a boy named Chaska grew strong. He had been born while the snow buried the village, his mother whispering prayers to the buffalo spirit as the storm raged. By the time he could walk, he knew how to hold a bough, how to feed the fire, how to tie the hides tight when the winds began to rise. His grandmother told him, "The teepee bends with the wind. So must you. Bend, but never break." In the forests, a girl named Winona learned the secrets of the wigwam. She watched her mother weave bark and mats, listened to her father speak of the trees as living relatives. She learned to hear the creak of wood not as weakness but as song, the forest reminding her to endure. When storms came, she smiled. "The trees stand with us," she said. "I am never afraid." In the longhouses, in the great wooden halls, children grew surrounded by many families. They learned early to share food, to share warmth, to share sorrow. A boy named Ahuli listened to the songs of the elders echoing above the rafters. He felt the drums in his chest and swore one day he would lead the chants himself. For him, the longhouse was not just shelter but a teacher, teaching him that one voice is strong, but many voices together are unbreakable. In the earth lodges, among the sod-covered lodges, a child named Ahiv grew beneath the earth's embrace. He learned that the soil itself was kin, that the thick walls were not built against nature but with it. His first memory was the glow of firelight against earthen walls, his father's voice telling him, "The earth is our mother. If you love her, she will hold you safe." In the igloos, in the far north, where the aurora danced, a girl named Scylla was born inside an igloo while the storm screamed outside. Her father cut snow blocks by lamplight as her cries filled the dome. Growing up, she pressed her small hands to the glowing walls and asked her mother, "Why is the ice so warm?" Her mother smiled and said, "Because our ancestors live inside it." From then on, Scylla believed the storm itself carried voices of those who came before. The children of the storm grew with stories in their ears and fire in their hearts. They did not fear the blizzards, for they had been born in their shadow. They carried forward the memory of survival, the skills of building, the songs of endurance. And when the next storm gathered, they would be ready, not only to endure it, but to teach their own children that no winter, however fierce, could erase the people who remembered. After the great blizzard, when the sun returned and the world lay silent beneath its heavy white cloak, the elders gathered the children. They sat them close to the fires, inside tipis, wigwams, longhouses, earth lodges, and igloos, and spoke words that had been carried through countless generations. The elders knew storms would always return. They knew that no shelter, no fire, no single family could face the winter alone. What mattered was memory, wisdom, and unity. So they began to teach. Lessons of the Plains. In the teepee, old Nokomis leaned on her staff as children crowded around her. She pointed to the tall poles overhead. "These are the ribs of the world," she said. "Without them, the buffalo hides cannot stand. Alone, a pole falls. Together, they make a circle that no storm can break. You are like these poles. Alone, you may bend and fall. Together, you will always endure." The children traced the lines of the poles with their eyes, understanding for the first time that their survival was woven into one another. Lessons of the Forests. In the wigwam village, Grandfather Onawa held a sapling in his wrinkled hands. He bent it slowly until it curved like the roof above them. "See how it bends," he told them. "It does not fight the wind, and so it does not break. Be like the sapling. When the storm comes, bow to it. Endure it. And when it passes, rise again." The children nodded, their small fingers brushing the bark walls around them. They felt the truth in the curve of the wood itself. Lessons of the Longhouses. In the longhouse, Chief Yona sat in the center aisle, his voice deep as the drum beats. "Listen to the song of the fires," he said. "One fire burns small. Many fires together burn bright enough to chase the cold away. So it is with us. If you keep your warmth only for yourself, it will fade. Share it, and it will grow." The children looked at the rows of families along the walls, each fire glowing, each voice part of the same hum. They learned that unity was not choice, it was life. Lessons of the Earth Lodges. In the Earth Lodge, Elder Maddo pressed his palm against the earthen wall. "This is our mother," he whispered. "We do not build against her, we build with her. She gives us soil, water, food, and shelter. Honor her, and she will honor you. Forget her, and she will remind you with storms." The children pressed their own small hands to the wall, feeling the cold earth and the warmth within. They promised silently to never forget. Lessons of the Arctic. In the glowing igloo, old Aput pointed to the shimmering sky. "The lights above are our ancestors," he told the children. "They dance so you will remember, life does not end with the storm. We are part of them, and they are part of us. Respect the snow, for it gives us walls. Respect the ice, for it gives us paths. Respect the storm, for it gives us strength." The children's eyes widened as green and blue light rippled through the ice above. They felt the presence of something greater than themselves, a bond that reached beyond time. Thus the teachings passed from fire to ear, from heart to heart. The children of the storm grew into the keepers of wisdom. They learned not only how to build shelters, but why the shelters mattered. Each teepee, wigwam, longhouse, earth lodge, and igloo was a living story, and the people were its guardians. And when the next storm rose, as it always did, the children would no longer tremble. They would remember the words of the elders, and they would know, survival is not only in walls and fires, but in unity, respect, and memory. The year after the great blizzard, the land seemed almost gentle. Spring brought green shoots through the melting snow, rivers ran strong again, and buffalo herds thundered across the plains. Families hunted, fished, gathered berries, and celebrated the sun's warmth. Children who had been born during the storm took their first steps in the grass, their laughter carrying across villages. But the elders warned, do not be fooled. The storm always returns. By autumn, the signs began. The winds grew sharp. Birds flew south in great flocks. The trees shed their leaves until forests stood bare, black against the sky. Hunters returned from the fields with heavy catches, but their faces were grim. They had seen snow gathering on the distant hills. On the plains. In the teepee villages, boys who had once been children of the storm now stood taller, their hands strong enough to lift poles and stretch hides. Under the guidance of their mothers and grandmothers, they tied the buffalo skins tighter than ever before. One boy, Chaska, who had been born in the blizzard, whispered as he worked, "This time I will be ready." In the forests, Winona, the girl who had grown among wigwams, walked with her father as they cut fresh saplings. She bent them with her hands, laughing when the wood curved without breaking. "The forest still remembers," her father said. "And so do we." They layered bark thick across the dome, sealing every gap. In the longhouses. In the great wooden halls, Ahuli sat beside the elders, now old enough to tend the fire himself. He fed it carefully, learning to keep the flames steady. "The longhouse is a body," the chief told him. "And the fire is its heart. Keep it strong, and the people will live." Ahuli nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility for the first time. In the earth lodges. Ahiv pressed his hands into the soil walls of his family's lodge, helping his father patch cracks with fresh sod. "The earth holds us like children," his father said. "But we must care for her too." Ahiv felt pride in his chest, knowing that when the storm came, his lodge would not fall. In the igloos. Far north, Scylla, now a young girl, helped her father cut blocks of snow. Her small hands carried them one by one, placing them into the spiral. "The snow is not our enemy," her father reminded her. "It is our stone, our shield." Scylla smiled, her cheeks glowing, as she watched the dome rise beneath the dancing lights of the sky. When winter returned, it did not come quietly. The blizzard swept in like a memory reborn, howling winds, endless snow, and a cold that pierced through every crack. But this time, the children of the storm were no longer helpless infants. They were builders, firekeepers, hunters, singers. Inside each shelter, they worked beside their elders, stronger than before. They carried wood, fed fires, comforted siblings, and reminded one another of the stories they had been told. Fear did not vanish, but it was tempered by knowledge. And when the storm passed, as all storms eventually do, the villages stood tall. The teepees leaned but did not fall. The wigwams bent but did not break. The longhouses glowed with smoke and song. The earth lodges held steady, cradled by the soil. The igloos shone like stars beneath the aurora. The elders gathered the children and said, "Now you have seen. The storm has tested you, and you have answered. You are no longer only children of the storm. You are its keepers. The memory of survival now rests in your hands." And so the circle continued, one generation teaching the next, each storm forging stronger people, each shelter carrying the wisdom of centuries. Years turn like the great wheel of the seasons. The storms came and went, as certain as the rising of the sun and the falling of the night. Children grew into hunters, gatherers, mothers, and fathers. Elders who had once told stories by the fire now walked slower, their voices softer, but their wisdom brighter than ever. The shelters remained, teepees on the plains, wigwams in the forests, longhouses by the rivers, earth lodges on the prairies, and igloos beneath the northern lights. They stood not only as homes but as teachers, reminding every new generation of the lessons carved into their walls. In the teepees, Chaska, once the frightened boy who pressed his ear to the hide to hear the storm's whispers, now stood tall as a man. He had hunted buffalo, carried hides, and raised his own teepee with the help of his wife and children. When the winter came, he sat his son by the fire and said, "Listen to the wind. Do not fear it. It speaks to you as it spoke to me. Bend with it, and you will never break." In the wigwams, Winona grew into a mother. She wove mats with swift fingers, layering bark across the curved bones of her wigwam. Her daughters worked beside her, learning to listen to the creak of wood, learning to respect the gifts of the forest. At night, she told them, "The trees bend for us. They give us walls. Never take without thanks, for the forest is alive, and it remembers." In the longhouses, Ahuli had become a keeper of the fire. His voice rose among the elders, chanting songs that echoed in the rafters. His children learned the rhythm of the drums, the meaning of sharing food, the truth that no one survives alone. One evening, as snow battered the walls, he told them, "A single voice can be lost in the storm. But many voices together can be heard even by the spirits above." In the earth lodges, Ahiv became a builder. He showed his children how to press sod into the cracks, how to strengthen the wooden beams before the snows came. His youngest son once asked, "Why do we live under the earth?" Ahiv smiled and placed his hand against the wall. "Because the earth is our mother. When the storm comes, she holds us close. Never forget, our strength comes from her." In the igloos, Scylla, now a woman, taught her children to carve snow blocks beneath the green shimmer of the aurora. She told them of the night she was born in a storm, and how the igloo's light had saved her family. Her daughter pressed her cheek to the glowing wall and asked, "Is the ice really alive?" Scylla nodded. "Yes. It carries the voices of our ancestors. When the wind howls, listen closely. You will hear them singing." And so the circle turned. The children became the teachers, and the teachers became the honored ancestors. Storms would always return, fierce and endless, but each new generation was ready. They carried not only the skills of building, but the wisdom of endurance. The shelters stood as symbols, but the true shelter was memory, the unbroken line of lessons, stories, and songs that bound the people together. As long as that circle remained, no blizzard could scatter them, no winter could erase them. For the storm was eternal, but so too was the spirit of the people. The firelight flickered low as the elders gathered for what would be their last winter together. Their hair was white like the snow outside, their hands wrinkled like the bark of old trees, but their eyes glowed with the light of memory. Children and grandchildren sat close, their faces bright in the shadows, waiting for the words that would guide them long after the elders were gone. The plains. In a teepee glowing against the frozen plains, Nokomis raised her trembling hand toward the poles. These poles have held us since before your birth. They hold not just the heights but our prayers, our breath, our lives. One day, I will not be here. But this teepee will remain, and with it, my spirit. Promise me you will never let the circle break. Her family answered softly, we promise. The forests. In the Wigwam village, Grandfather Onawa placed a sapling into the fire, its smoke curling upward. When I was young, I bent these saplings with my own hands. Now my hands are weak. But yours are strong. Promise me you will bend with the storm, and you will rise when it passes. His daughters and sons bowed their heads, we promise. The Longhouses. In the great Longhouse, Chief Yona stood for the last time before the central fire. I have shared food, warmth, and song with you all my life. When I am gone, share still. Do not let hunger divide you, or pride blind you. Promise me you will keep many fires burning as one. The people struck their drums in unison, their voices rising, we promise. The Earth Lodges. In the deep embrace of the Earth Lodge, Elder Maddo pressed his frail body against the soil wall. This earth has carried me from birth to old age. Soon it will carry me beyond. But you, my children, will remain. Promise me you will love the earth as you love your own blood. The children, with hands pressed against the wall beside his, whispered, we promise. The Arctic. In a glowing igloo beneath the aurora, old Apud held his granddaughter close. Look at the lights above, he said, his breath slow and heavy. One day I will join them. When you see them dance, know it is me. Promise me you will listen to the storm, and never fear it, for it carries the voices of those who came before. The girl, her eyes shining, whispered, I promise. That winter, some of the elders passed into the next world. Their spirits joined the lights, the winds, the soil, the forests, the buffalo. But their promises lived on, etched into the hearts of their children and grandchildren. The people knew then that survival was not only about building walls or lighting fires. It was about memory, about promises kept. Each teepee, wigwam, longhouse, earth lodge, and igloo stood not just as shelter, but as proof that the ancestors still lived, through every storm, in every promise, forever. The elders had gone, their voices now part of the winds that swept across the plains, forests, rivers, earth, and ice. But their teachings lived on. Each new winter was no longer only a season of hardship, it was also a season of remembrance. Every storm carried with it the weight of old stories, the warmth of old fires, the echoes of promises once spoken. On the plains. When the wind screamed across the grasslands, Chaska gathered his children inside the teepee. As the hides trembled and the fire hissed, he told them of his grandmother, Nokomis, and her words, "These poles are the ribs of the world." His children touched the poles with reverence, knowing their strength was more than wood, it was memory, living in every stitch of hide. In the forests, Winona, now a grandmother herself, sat in her wigwam, the bark walls glowing red with firelight. She bent a sapling in her hands, as Onawa had once done for her, showing the children how it bowed but did not break. "Every storm is a teacher," she told them. "It reminds us that we are part of the forest, and the forest is part of us." The children's eyes widened as they heard the branches outside crack beneath the snow. In the Longhouses. In the Longhouse, Ahuli led the people in song. His drumbeat matched the rhythm of the storm outside, uniting many voices into one. "Chief Yona told us to share many fires," he reminded them. "And so we do." Each family passed bowls of food along the aisles, no one left hungry, no one left silent. The Longhouse did not just hold bodies, it held memory, bound into every chant that rose into the rafters. In the earth lodges, Ahiv knelt by the fire, his children beside him. As snow pressed down upon the sod roof, he told them of Elder Matto, who had pressed his hand to the earth and called it mother. "The storm does not bury us," Ahiv whispered. "It embraces us, as the earth always does." His children leaned close, pressing their own palms against the wall, feeling the heartbeat of the soil. In the igloos. Far north, Scylla's children and grandchildren sat in the glowing dome of snow. Outside, the aurora flickered green and blue, shifting like dancing spirits. She told them of Aput's last words, "When you see the lights, know it is me." The children lifted their eyes, watching the sky ripple, believing their ancestors were indeed dancing above them. In the storm's howl, they heard laughter, comfort, and strength. Every blizzard became a story, every gust of wind a voice from the past. The people learned not to see storms as enemies, but as messengers. They carried the voices of those who had gone before, reminding the living that they were part of something greater, an eternal circle of survival and spirit. And so, long after the great blizzard, long after the elders had passed, the memory of storms lived on. In every teepee, wigwam, longhouse, earth lodge, and igloo, the same truth burned: storms may return, but memory is stronger. The people had always spoken of the storm as if it were alive. Some called it a beast with white breath and claws of wind. Others said it was an old spirit, wandering the world to test the strength of humankind. Whatever its name, all agreed, winter was not empty, it had a soul. The plains. One night in the teepee village, as snow pressed heavy against the hides, Chaska's son asked, "Father, is the storm angry?" Chaska stared into the fire, then shook his head. "No, my child. The storm is not anger, it is power. It comes to remind us that we must prepare, that we must honor the buffalo who gave us these walls. If we respect it, the storm will pass and leave us stronger." Outside, the wind shrieked, but inside the boy listened to the hides creak and thought, "The storm is speaking to me." The forests. In the wigwam village, Winona told her grandchildren a tale. Long ago, the storm was a lonely child, cast out from the sky. It wandered, seeking a family. When it came to the forest, the trees bent to protect it. That is why storms bend our shelters, they remember their first home. The children giggled, but when the wind rattled the bark walls, they no longer felt fear. They imagined a child outside, playing among the trees, testing their strength. The Longhouses. In the longhouse, Ahuli led a chant as the storm howled through the vents. "Do you hear it?" he asked the people. "The storm is singing with us." The children listened closely, and indeed, the roar of the blizzard blended with the pounding drums until it felt like one great voice. The people smiled, for in that moment the storm was no longer outside, it was inside, part of them, part of their song. The earth lodges. In his lodge of soil and timber, Ahab spoke to his children as snow piled on the roof. "The storm is heavy," he said. "But heavy things make us strong. When the storm presses down, it is the earth reminding us she is always above and below us. Respect her weight, and you will never fall." The children leaned their heads back, listening to the muffled thunder above, and felt proud to be part of something so strong. The Arctic. Far north, beneath the aurora, Scylla told her children, the storm is a traveler. It walks across the ice with long strides, wrapping the world in its cloak. But when it passes, it leaves gifts, fresh snow for our igloos, silence for our hunting, beauty in the sky above. Do not curse it. Thank it. The children crawled into their furs, comforted by the thought that the storm itself was a guest, not an enemy. Thus, across the lands, the storm became more than wind and snow. It became a spirit with many faces, sometimes fierce, sometimes kind, always eternal. The people did not try to defeat it, for they knew such a thing was impossible. Instead, they learned to live with it, to listen, to respect. And in return, the spirit of winter gave them strength, teaching each generation the same lesson: survival is not in fighting the storm, but in becoming part of its song. The storm had come and gone, as it always did. The land lay silent, wrapped in white, but inside the shelters fires still burned. In every teepee, wigwam, longhouse, earth lodge, and igloo, the glow of flames pushed back the darkness. The people sat close, their faces lit with warmth, their hearts filled with memory. The elders said, "The fire is more than heat. It is spirit. It is the breath of our ancestors, the light of our children, the promise of survival. As long as the fire burns, we endure." In the plains, families added fresh wood to the teepee's fire, watching the smoke rise through the vent like a prayer. In the forests, the wigwams glowed like round lanterns, their bark walls shimmering with stories painted in shadow. In the longhouses, many fires burned as one, their light uniting families in laughter, song, and counsel. In the earth lodges, the fire reflected against the soil, reminding the people that the earth itself carried their flame. And in the far north, the igloos shone beneath the aurora, the glow of lamps turning snow into walls of gold. The storm would return, it always did. But the fire would return too, carried in memory, in hands, in voices. Each new generation would learn to tend it, to guard it, to share it. And as long as that flame survived, so too would the people. The eternal fire burned not only in wood or fat or spark. It burned in the circle of shelters, in the circle of families, in the circle of life itself. And so the story ends, as the elders would say by the fire. The storm is strong, but we are stronger. The wind may howl, the snow may fall, but our circle endures. As long as we carry the fire within us, no winter can silence our song. Sparkles, if you felt the warmth of this story, remember, just like the fire keeps the people alive, your support keeps stories alive. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe for more stories, so that the circle never breaks, and the flame always burns.